Lately, I've been feeling a bit tired of chasing a secret formula, the idea that maybe the right color or brush or paper will finally make my portraits a bit better. But then I started wondering, maybe the answer is not in adding something new, but in taking something away. And so in this video, we're going to reduce things. I gave up my full palette for this project, and what came from that limitation, well, you'll see for yourself in just a minute. But I hope that you'll hear me out, because this idea of painting with less is a very powerful one.
We will do a watercolor painting in just one color. I want to make this a monochrome portrait. And the color that I've recently been obsessed with is this one. And I want to show you. Color is just beautiful because there's not that many red colors that are suitable for a monochrome painting. Red is usually very light color. When we paint in monochrome, we need a full range of tonal value. I would need a single color from a tube to produce near black, and this one can do it. And when you dilute this, then you get a whole beautiful range. So this is my new monochrome obsession. For the longest time, it's been Prussian blue that I use for monochrome paintings, but now I'm going to be using this one. My monochrome painting is usually very straightforward. Mixing color is out of the way. We just focus on tonal values and on the technique.
For this little project, I sketched the face of Anya Taylor-Joy. She has such striking features. Something about this reference photo really caught my eye. I do not usually feel drawn to painting celebrities. I actually prefer painting people that I know, maybe with a bit less perfect face, but this time was an exception. The photo just jumped out at me on Pinterest and it clicked. It turned out to be harder to sketch than I expected, and honestly, somewhere along the way, I think I ended up with Emma Stone instead of Anya. I will set up my watercolor tools, and this one's about as minimal as it gets. Just a single pigment, a porcelain plate for mixing, and a jar of water, and maybe 3 brushes at most. Honestly, I would almost compare it to sketching with pencil, though you might laugh at me for saying that. But compared to my usual watercolor setup, this one is incredibly low effort to prepare. And that's the point, it removes the friction. No palette decisions, no second guessing, just pick up your tools and paint. Which also means less procrastination and more time actually spent practicing.
Let's try to do this.
When applying this first wash of paint, you can really focus on how the paint behaves. Since the layer is watery, the main challenge becomes practicing water control. I always use a large brush for this, not a small one, because it helps keep the wash alive. It needs to stay wet long enough for you to connect all the areas smoothly. A big brush might feel uncomfortable at first, but it lets you do the work quickly and confidently. And if you choose one that has a fine tip, you still get plenty of control and precision.
Watercolor, I always say it, but it's true. It goes very pale when it dries, loses a lot of the value. And so if you don't want to do like plenty of layers, then add some more pigment in the first. Here I do not want like strong edges, so I will have to add water. This is the part, like when you add your first layer, when your pigment starts to dry. If it's not quite dry yet and you think it's wet and you want to do some changes, you go back with a clean brush that has water on it and it creates blooms in a second. And I always do this in every single portrait. I make this kind of mistake, same mistake. And it causes blooms, which I sometimes keep. Sometimes I just try to get rid of them in the second layer, mask it somehow. But I think that we've managed to capture at least like a general sense of where the light and shadow is. Let's move on to the hair. The hair will be in mostly it's like mid-tone, but I want to add some texture.
Your first layer can easily take up to 10 minutes. I think of it as an underpainting. Its job is to establish the light areas and separate them from the darks. But not all brushstrokes are equal here. For the face and clothing, I usually use very wet paint to keep everything soft and smooth. But with the hair, I'll often switch to a slightly drier brush, even in this first layer, to just add a bit of texture early on. This layer is fun. It does not have to be perfect. If it's a little messy, it's totally fine. Just try to protect your light areas. That's one thing that we can't really fix later. One of the most fun parts for me is adding these abstract, watery shapes with a large flat brush. If you want to try this, make sure that your paper is laying flat on the table. It really helps the water move naturally. Do not overload with pigment here. Let the water do most of the work and just guide it. Before you let it dry, gently remove any excess water, especially around the edges, so you don't end up with blooms where you don't want them.
Yes, the painting is now dry. I will use both the large brush and the small brush for the details.
Before this part, I honestly had to sit down with a cup of coffee because shading a face this perfectly sculpted feels like real work. Normally, I do not aim for super smooth blending in watercolor, it gets a bit boring even, but there was something about the energy in this reference that made me want to try. Still, painting with just one color made everything feel so much simpler. When you're not busy mixing skin tones or constantly having to adjust warmth or coolness in every area, that you can really focus on how you lay down your paint. You start noticing your own process more clearly, what is working, what is not, and I think that kind of awareness is where real growth of your technique starts to happen. Reading through your comments on my recent videos, I realized that shading is something a lot of you struggle with, and honestly, it's a problem for myself often enough. But here are a few tips that helped me overcome most of the frustrations with this part of realistic painting. My first tip, do not aim to match the full range of tonal values from your reference photo. The way I see it is, if I wanted perfect face, the way a photograph can reproduce, if I wanted that on my wall, I would print a photograph. So even if you spend 5 hours recreating every subtle transition perfectly, it will often end up feeling overworked and flat. What if we instead try simplifying the value structure and focus on just 3 or 4 key values? Light, mid-tones and darks. It's very simple, and this approach can give your painting depth and clarity while still leaving room for that painterly expressive quality that, in my opinion, makes a portrait truly exciting to look at. Another tip for painting soft diffused shadows in watercolor is not to be afraid to pre-wet your paper and paint wet in wet. This is especially helpful when you're trying to tackle those large shadow areas. Damp paper gives you more time to position your shadow. The third tip is to edit your reference photo to increase contrast, especially if you struggle with seeing where the shadows fall. The simple adjustment can make a huge difference, particularly if the lighting in the original image that you have is flat or unclear. Once the contrast is bumped up, the light and shadow groups become much more obvious, which makes mapping out your values easier. But honestly, my best tip is just to sketch and shade faces as much as possible, because the more you practice creating quick, functional thumbnails before painting, the more confident you'll feel when it's time to add watercolor. And if you're looking for a structured way to build that kind of habit, Skillshare, the sponsor of today's video, is a great place to start. It is the largest online learning community for creatives, with thousands of classes across watercolor, illustration, design, photography, and so much more. The platform is designed by creatives for creatives, with a learn-by-doing approach that encourages members to complete and share a project after each class. One class that I absolutely loved, and one that pairs beautifully with watercolor portraiture, is Drawing Faces, an expressive approach to portrait illustration by Al Case. This class really helped me to rethink the way I approach structure and expression when sketching faces. I also recently released a brand new Skillshare class, a 7-day monochrome watercolor portrait challenge. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today and see where your creative habit can take you. And thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video.
I don't even breathe. I focus so much. I want some sort of composition, trying to figure out how this hair string is supposed to flow, which direction, how it's supposed to look like, because these are like very easy to mess up and you don't really get much chance to correct this on a white paper. This painted wrong or too thick on a white paper, that's a problem.
Now that the hardest shading part is behind me, painting the hair, styling the portrait, and adding those final touches is the fun part. It's where everything starts to come together. But stay with me because I actually messed up the hair section pretty badly. It's still slightly visible in the final result, but I want to show you exactly how I salvaged it and how you can correct mistakes like this on a higher quality watercolor paper. It's not easy and it's definitely a bit tricky, but it is possible. And so I want to show you how you can do it as well.
I'm gonna fix now. Clean water, and this brush is a bit more sturdy. I could possibly like rub this, try to take it off the page, at least most of this pigment, so that it does not really look dark. Then we have to go over and clean it up with darker color.
Once you lift the pigment with a stiffer brush, you can try painting over the area again, but in my case I really needed clean white paper and that's just not possible. Every pigment stains a little and this one in particular stains a lot. That said, in the final painting the mistake is barely noticeable and honestly if you didn't know it was there, you would probably think it was just part of the abstract texture from the first layer. So don't panic if something goes wrong with your painting. Watercolor has a way of forgiving in subtle, beautiful ways. The last part I had to paint was her blouse, and for this I did not hold anything back. I used bold saturated pigment straight from the tube, no dilution, especially in the folds of the fabric. It gave me this strong contrast that I think really suits her character. For what it's worth, I really do love painting with just a single color. Those 8 monochrome portraits that I painted this week, I've enjoyed every one of them and I truly hope you will try something similar for yourself. I would love to hear your thoughts on painting in monochrome. Do you have a favorite color for it? Let me know in the comments. And if you subscribe, you'll be the first to know when the new video goes live. Thank you for watching, wishing you a peaceful and creative week ahead, and I will see you again soon. Bye!